Okay, welcome to Module 3 of Music Theory Class Number 1. Glad you could join us today. Right at the end of Module 2, I spoke about a concept that almost everybody went, huh? And I did it on purpose. It was the word diatonic interval. Okay, so we've already defined the word interval as the distance between any two notes. And the unit of measurement that we use to measure the distance is half steps, right? Okay, so a diatonic interval is specifically the intervals within a major scale. The word diatonic means of the major scale, and the word interval means the distance between any two notes. So the word diatonic interval means the intervals that have to do with the major scale. So we're going to study those in this module. And there's a couple of notes about intervals that I want to bring out next. First off, in your notes, the very first thing that says an interval may describe the distance between two notes playing at the same time. It also can describe the distance between two notes that are played in succession, one after the other. Okay, so just really briefly, if I go over to the keyboard, okay, if I play these two notes right here, and we're going to learn an interval here in a minute that describes the distance between those two. But I can also describe the distance if I go from this note to that note. What was the distance that I traveled? Okay, so the word interval can mean either of those two things. Does that make sense? Okay, so first off, intervals can be describing two notes at the same time or two notes played one after the other. So if I played two notes, you could describe that, oh, that's a such and such interval. Or if I went from one note to the next note, I moved that distance. Okay? Next note, any questions on that so far? So this is all going to build. I'm just double checking. Okay? The next note I've got on there is when describing notes at the same time, we always determine the interval names based on the relationship from the bottom note to the top, every time without fail. If notes are played together, like in a chord or just in the interval are played at the same time, it's always from the bottom up. But if notes are played in succession, one after the other, we describe the interval from the first note to the second note. Okay, and the difference is when you play two notes together, you're obviously going to have one lower than the other from bottom to top. But when they're one after the other, the top note, the first note might be higher than the second note, in which case we're getting the distance from top to bottom, but it's because it's in succession, because it's one after the other. Question? You got it? Okay, good. Gotcha. So for an example on the next line, I got those two notes together, they create an octave, because we all know what octave means, right? Versus the statement, play that first note and then play it an octave up from there. So it's two different ways of describing an interval using that name octave. Okay? Now, there's a word called quality that we're jumping into next. Quality describes the type of the interval. And then as a sidebar, later when we get to chords, you can also describe chords in terms of their quality. Okay? So there's three types of intervals that are diatonic: perfect, major, and minor. You got perfect intervals, major intervals, and minor intervals. And when I'm describing the interval, using one of those terms, I'm describing the quality. Wait, of this interval, what quality is it? Oh, it's a major. Oh, it's a perfect. So those three terms are altogether collectively called the quality of the interval. Everybody so far? Good to go? It's all going to build, but I'm getting some weird looks from some of the people in the room. But I'll just get by with that. I will say the more weird looks that I feel are unjustified, the less candy you may receive later. So careful. I'm just saying. Okay, so moving on to the next page, perfect intervals. So now we're on page 25. Perfect intervals. If you've got the major scale, which we all know how to create, whole, whole, half, whole, 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 half, there's four perfect intervals. They're the first, fourth, fifth, and eighth scale degrees of the major scale. The very first scale degree is called the root. It's also sometimes called the unison or the tonic. I'll explain that in a second. While the eighth scale degree is called the octave. Now I'm going to move to the keyboard and then guitar kind of quickly. Okay, so if we've got our C major scale that we know and love, here's C. So the scale degrees on the C major scale are all the white keys, right? No sharps or flats. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. I'm going to make the keyboard just a little louder for my mic. So the first scale degree is going to be C, and that's called the root of the scale, right? 2, 3, 4. The F on a C major scale is called the perfect fourth. The G of a C major scale is called a perfect fifth, and the next C up is called the octave. Now, if I'm just talking about the one note, and I say, okay, we're in such and such a scale, the root of that scale is a C, no problem. But also the word tonic, same thing. The tonic of the scale is the one, the first scale degree. But this term unison is specifically talking about two notes together. And you can't make two notes of the same pitch on a keyboard happen at the same time. You can't make a unison, because I have to have another push, and now they're in succession, not together. I can hold down the pedal and have one sustain, but I'm still not hearing two unison notes at the same time headed to the fretboard. This is something that the guitar has superior, in a sense, over the keyboard, because notes appear in multiple places at the same time. Okay, so Eddie ate dynamite, goodbye Eddie. Here's the E string. If I go up to the letter note named A on the E string, I'm going to this fret here, the 5th fret. So F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A. So if I play this A, I should probably turn it up. So if I play this A is the exact same pitch as the open string A of Eddie ate dynamite, right? So if I play these two notes together, I'm now creating a unison, right? You can't make a unison on a keyboard. You can play the same note twice in a row. You can't play the same note at the same time twice, okay? So the principle of the word unison. So if I get two people to sing the same note, they're singing a unison. If I get a choir to all sing together the same note, they're singing in unison. Most churches on Sunday morning, we all sing unison on the melody, that same term, right? So, the 4th and 5th degrees are called perfect fourth and perfect fifth, okay? Perfect means the quality, right? The root, octave, 4th, and 5th are all intervals that have pure, stable sounds, and thus considered to have a perfect quality, or that word started when they first started creating music theory. Why is perfect called perfect? And we're going to unpack a little bit more as things go on, but I wanted to throw this in right here. Perfect intervals have a high level of consonance, which means that their sounds are very stable, are harmonious. The intervals of 1, 4, 5, and 8 also keep the same quality if you're to invert them, which we're going to do here in a minute, where other kinds of intervals have an opposite quality with respect to their inversion. That statement right there is going to get unpacked as the class goes forward here tonight. But I wanted to throw it in so when you go back and study, you'll remember that part right there. Okay, so any questions on perfect intervals? What are the scale degrees of the perfect intervals? 1, 4, 5, and 8. That's our perfect intervals. Perfect root, perfect octave, perfect fourth and fifth. Now, next page, page 26. Now there's this principle called augmented or diminished. Okay? Now everybody look up at me for just a second. And remember back last week we went sharps go up and flats go. Most of the time when we want to use the term we want to go up or down, we use sharp or flat. There's a couple of situations where we use these other terms that kind of mean the same thing, and I'm going to unpack them. Augmented is literally saying I want to make the interval a little bit bigger. Okay? I want to take whatever the interval is and augment it by making it a half step larger. That's like the legit definition. But what's more of a practical definition is augmented means raise up a half step. So it's very similar to sharp. Okay? So augmented and sharp seem similar in the way that they're functioning in day-to-day music. Diminish, by the same token, literally means to take whatever interval you have and make it smaller by a half step, which is kind of similar to the word flat. So in some cases, they're interchangeable. Most of the time, you use sharp and flat in day-to-day music making. Every once in a while, you're going to use the word augmented and diminished. And you almost always use augmented and diminished when you're talking about a fourth or a fifth. So that's why we're talking about it tonight as it relates to perfect intervals. So I'm reading from the notes in 26. A perfect interval can also have a modifier to its name, either augmented fourth or diminished fifth, etc. In both situations, the term implies that I'm moving the note by a half step. Augmented means a note raised by a half step. Diminished means a note lowered by a half step. But you only see this terminology most of the time applied to the 4th and 5th scale degree, as in augmented 5th and diminished 4th. This will also make a little bit more sense when we get to tritone below. So if you've already been through the class and you're coming back, tritone, augmented 4th, and 5th are going to come together here in a minute. With me so far? You trust me that all this is going to make sense as we go forward. So far, nobody's asked any questions, which means my candy bowl is full. And this is sad. But we're going to move on to major intervals. I kind of feel like this is going to come pretty natural to most of you guys. Pun intended. Okay? Thank you for laughing. Okay, we're so short on candy. If I get a decent laugh on a bad joke, I'm throwing out candy, Alex Morales. Yes, Sarah, that was Alex. So, major intervals, which are also known as diatonic intervals. We've said that several times, right? Now, these are the 2nd, 3rd, 6th, and 7th scale degree. So if you look at the diagram bottom of page 26, now you've got all the perfects and all the majors there. Starts with the root is 1. The number 2 is called a major 2nd. The 3rd scale degree is a major 3rd. 4th and 5th are perfect. 6th and 7th are majors. 8th is octave. Does that make sense to everybody so far? Now, Daniel, can you do me a favor and just close that door for me, the one that's to the office? Yeah, I think that'll reduce that. It's okay, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Daniel Guevara. Okay, so I think it's pretty obvious as we're looking at the keyboard. Let's try to do the fretboard with just our brain, okay? So in this, let's pretend we're going to work with the C major scale. And we're going to make the C major scale happen on the fretboard. If we're looking at the fretboard, I'm looking at the A string. 3 frets in is a C, right? So that's going to be the root. Now here's my question. Follow along. I'm trying to challenge you here. On the A string, if I play the 5th fret of the A string, what would I call the diatonic interval between the root of the scale and the 5th fret of the A string? It's much simpler than it sounds. I'm trying to ask the question very specifically. I'm looking for major 2nd is the right word, Joe. So I'm going to ask the question again so you'll understand what I'm saying. If our key is in C, if our root is in C, is the note C, and we want to look at the 5th fret of the A string, we count it up. 5th fret of the A string is a D. And D, as it relates to C, is a major 2nd. Now, again, staying in C, what's the relationship called between the root of the key of C and the open G string? Perfect 5th is the right answer, right? Because between C and G is a perfect 5th. Now, also, what's the 5th fret of D note name? G. So on the D string, the 5th fret is a G. What's the relationship between that note and the root? C. Simpler than you think it is. It's also a perfect 5th. See how I trick you there? You think it's more complicated. The same answer. But you'll see you'll see guitar players all the time will take their finger position and play what would typically be a C in one position and go inward 2 frets and up 1 string between the C and the G like we just saw. If you play those two notes together, which we're calling in this class right now a perfect 5th, guitar players will also many times call that a power chord, okay? Because many times they can get a lot of music without having a 3rd note in their chord by playing that perfect 5th. And it started with distortion. When distortion came in on guitars, because the perfect intervals have more harmonious overtones, the distortion sounded better. It's hard to get distorted guitars to sound good with non-perfect intervals, okay? So they started calling that perfect 5th a power chord, okay? Well, their fingers will typically take the shape of, like if you did a C and a G. So you'd have one finger on the C. And I'm specifically not going to the fretboard because I want you to imagine it for this one. One finger's on the C, and another finger is on the G. That's 2 frets to the right, player's perspective, and 1 string up. Right. Now, if you'll notice, when they played it on the A and the D string in those 2 spots, which is the 3rd and 5th fret, the G is immediately string adjacent to another higher C on the G string. So you'll also see a root, fifth, and octave making a power chord. Okay? Makes a very consonant sound, and distortion really likes it. Any questions on major intervals so far? It applies to any notes. There are more advanced players that can make distortion work with all kinds of notes, but it's really easy to get a perfect fifth or a root fifth octave to sound nice with distortion. So you see it all the time. Now go to page 27 for me real quick. Practice distance from the root. Nothing. Okay. Okay, so going over the two diagrams on page 27, I'm going to be talking about these diagrams from the bottom up, so you can check your work as I'm talking through them. So on the left side of the paper is E flat. And that row, E flat's the note name, the root number 1 is a scale degree, an interval name, and there's 0 half steps between the root and the bottom. Now the next row above that should read F, 2 for the second scale degree, major second, and 2 half steps above the root. The next row should be G, which is the third scale degree, which is called the major third, and is 4 half steps. The next row up should be an A flat, which is the fourth scale degree, which we call a perfect fourth, and is 6 half steps. Excuse me, 5 half steps. 5 half steps. Next row above that is B flat, which is the fifth scale degree. We call it a perfect fifth. It's 7 half steps. Next above that should be a C, which is the sixth scale degree. We call it a major sixth. Anybody know the number of half steps? 9's the right answer. Next row, now we're on the second row from the top. Next row should be D. The degree is 7. The interval name is major seventh. 11 half steps. Top row should say E flat, 8, octave, and 12 half steps because we got 12 steps, half steps in an octave. Everybody with me so far? So we're going to flash up on the screen, or you might have to click a link to go to the diagram that shows the completed E flat. Go ahead and finish out the G and then check your work with the completed diagram on the screen. Now we get to the fun part. Because now we want to learn how to really identify and work with these intervals musically. So one thing I'm going to have you do towards the end of tonight with our homework is to have you sit down and practice playing on all the boards, both boards, all these intervals in multiple keys, and also singing them. Because I want you to start getting in your brain what they sound like. So I'm going to start over at the keyboard for a moment, and we're going to look, I'm going to page 28. These are some musical examples of these intervals that we're talking about, these diatonic intervals. Okay? So the unison, remember we can't technically play a unison on the keyboard because you can't play 2 notes at once, but you can play it in succession. So we've got the William Tell Overture, the Lone Ranger thing. Anybody can sing that out? Thank you. What was your name, sir? Brett Lee. Thank you. You were B. Lee everywhere. So you went da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and that right there, 1, 1, 1. Everybody knows it's the same note. I don't think it's too many rocket scientists to know that that's the same note. You can identify a root. But the major second gets a little bit harder. Okay? The major second is from C to D, or it could be from G to A. Now, if the major second was starting on B flat, what would be the major second above B flat?
B flat is the root.
If B flat's the root, what's the major second above B flat? C's the right answer. A major second is a whole step or 2 half steps above the root. So B flat up to C. And the way we can hear that is we go, happy birth. That's a major second. Happy birth. So everybody sing major second. Major second. Sing it one more time. Major second. Now we're going to do it from another place. This right here is an F. What's a major second above F? G is the right answer. 2 half steps. A major second is 2 half steps in width. And we're going to sing major second. Sing it with me. Go. Major second. One more time. Major second. Get that locked in your brain. Next one is major third. How many half steps in a major third?
4.
4 is the right answer. Okay. On an A flat, how many half steps? 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. What note is that? C. So above an A flat, a major third above A flat is a C. Okay. So we're going to sing summertime. Remember, y'all heard that? And the living is easy. But the trick is that it starts off with the descending. Major third going down, and then major third going back up. So summertime gives both your ascending and descending. Summertime. So 1 to 3. So sing with me, major third. Major third, one more time. Major third. Now let's do it down here from F. Major third above F is 4 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4. A. Y'all should all be totally impressed. I'm doing this upside down, and I'm not even looking at the time. I'm impressed just doing it. From F up to A is 4 half steps, and it's a major third. Let's sing major third. Major third, major third. Now we're going to make a quick catharsis choir, and from Brett over to the right, everybody sing the F, left node, and from everybody to the left of me, everybody sing A. So this is the major third. Just sing La. Okay, that's good enough. Now I know you couldn't really hear that on the microphone, but it was really fun for me. Anyway, so that's what a major third is. Now, when you're at home, when you're doing this, do this at every key you can and go major third. Listen for major thirds in other music that you're listening to. Sing it to yourself. The more you do this, the more it gets locked in. And the people who don't get this locked in are people who just haven't done it enough. It takes repetition. Start looking for major thirds and major seconds and unisons in the music that you're playing now that you're trying to go for, okay? So you can start identifying it. Now the perfect fifth is real easy. Here comes the bride. Don't sing the next line because it's really mean. Yes, that's a perfect fourth. So if you oh is another one that I like to do with the Wizard of Oz, right? Perfect fourth. Here comes the bride. Okay. Here comes. So sing perfect fourth. Perfect fourth. One more time. Perfect fourth. Now we're going to start on D sharp. D sharp. What's a perfect fourth? How many half steps are a perfect fourth? 5 half steps. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So D sharp up to G sharp. It's perfect fourth. We'll sing it. Perfect fourth. One more time. Perfect fourth. So you're going to want to do this at home over and over again. All right, so you can start identifying it. What's fun is you start listening to the radio and you start hearing the bass line going, oh, he just went down a third. Oh, that was up a fourth. Oh, that was down a second. Hey, I could write this out. That's where we're heading, right? Okay, so looking at perfect fifth, okay, I'm going to start on a G. How many half steps in a perfect fifth? 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So the fifth of G is a D. It's another way we'd say it. The fifth of G is a D. It's perfect fifth. So we're going to go perfect fifth, but the way that we help remember it is twinkle, twinkle, little star. So perfect fifth, sing it with me. Perfect fifth, one more time. Perfect fifth. And now we're going to do it again from D. Here's a D for all the lower people. What's the fifth above D? The fifth above D is A. The D scale is D, E, F sharp, G, A, the fifth scale degree. 7 half steps. Sing it with me. Perfect fifth. Perfect fifth. One more time. Perfect fifth. Okay, I just want to be thinner on that one. Now, major sixth has a couple different ones. If you're outside of America, you probably didn't grow up with people on the TV going, let's see, NBC, NBC, right? So that's my favorite one, and there's other ones. So C up to A is a perf major sixth. I'm going to warn you in advance. Give yourself grace on all the sixths, because there's another group of 6 we're coming to later. The sixths are a little harder to hear. Typically, the sixths are the toughest ones, which conversely means you should probably listen and practice singing the sixth more than anybody, more than any of the other intervals, because they're typically the hardest ones. Here's a G. What's a sixth above G? Anybody? Anybody? Sixth above G? Sixth above G? Going once, going twice. He's the right answer from Bobby, who gave it already. He's been playing keyboards her whole life. And Alex, who's been just figuring this theory stuff out. Well, you already knew some stuff, but G up to E is a major sixth. So I like to go N, B, C, but we're going to go major sixth. So sing it with me. Major sixth. Major sixth. Just go la, 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 la. Now we're going to do it down here. There's a D. What's the sixth above D? What's the sixth above D? B is the right answer. Good job, Brett. D, E, F sharp, G, A, B is the 6th scale degree. How many half steps in a major 6th? Should be right on the page right there. 9's the right answer. D up to B is 9 half steps. We're going to sing major 6. Sing it with me. Major 6th, major 6th. Now we get to the next one. The major 7th, which has 11 half steps. And you hear it in some of my favorite melodies of all time. From an E, a major 7th is up to a D sharp. Because a major 7th is 11 half steps. How many half steps in an octave? 12 half steps in an octave. So if I'm going for 11, I could make an octave and just go down a half step. Makes it a little simpler. Major 7th is you can go up an octave and go down a half step. And you can hear it in somewhere over the rainbow. So the O is the major 7th. Somewhere, or well, there's a few other ones that I've got listed later in the course. Okay, so major 7th, the theme from Superman, which always takes me a second to remember, but the second part of the theme, bum, 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 bum. No, it's after that. Bum, 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 is the next part, and I always forget it, but you can go click the link that you'll see later in the course to get the theme from Superman. And the perfect octave, the easy one, somewhere over the rainbow. So everybody do a major 7th with me. Okay, it's going to be here to here. We're going to do a couple of them. Ready, go. Major 7th, major 7th. It feels like it's unresolved, like it wants to sing the next note up, so it feels right, right? There's a tension in it. It's a beautiful tension. E to D sharp, major 7th. Now let's do a low one. Here's a B natural. What's the major 7th or 11 half steps above B natural? A sharp's the right answer. Some people might accidentally say B flat, but that's not as correct. Some people may say it in passing, but it's better to say A sharp, because if you've got a scale with B in it, you cannot also have a scale with B flat in it. It must be called an A sharp, right? So let's sing major 7th on the B to A sharp. Major 7th, major 7th, and the sopranos. Major 7th, major 7th. Okay, that's good. Now, there's also on the bottom of the sheet these descending intervals. I've got a couple of examples. We're going to get more later. I'm just going to go over a couple of them just so you can go. You go, Mary had a little, Mary is a major 2nd descending. Mary's a major 2nd. We already went over. Summertime is a descending interval. Let's see. Old MacDonald had a farm. Old MacDonald is a perfect 4th. Is a perfect 4th going down. And then there's my favorite, Flintstone. No, excuse me, G. Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. Okay, the upside down thing finally caught up to me. Flintstones. So that's G down to C. That's where we get our descending 5th. Man in the mirror. So let's move on. We're going to do some more of this a little later as we come back some more intervals, and I'll make sure I do it on the fretboard. But for now, we've defined all the major intervals. We've done a little ear training on them. We've done some scale building and degree naming. So out of this, the thing to concern yourself with is over and over going through these intervals, over and over playing them on whatever board you have access to. If you only have one board, that's fine. But try, if you've got a hold of a fretboard and a keyboard, to go over all these intervals in all keys you can think of. Randomly pick a key, F sharp, randomly pick an interval, perfect 5th. Find it on the fretboard, find it on the keyboard, play them in succession, play them together, and sing them. Do this over and over, rinse and repeat until you know it like the way your route to go home from work. Okay? So obviously there's only so much you can get in the course of this class, but interval ear training is one of the most important things you can do and is going to build on itself. So Bobby has a question.
Well, I was just going to say, if you're trying to do this on the fly, there's a really cool app called Finger Piano. It's pretty good pitch, too.
Can you spell that?
Finger Piano.
Oh, Finger Piano. So Bobby's suggesting a really good app called Finger Piano that can help you. And in addition to that, I was going to say, and I'm so glad you brought it up, there are websites that can help you with ear training, and there's one specific one you're going to see in the next module that I'm suggesting. There's apps for your phone. There's computer programs. There's all kinds of things that can help drill you so that when those intervals come along, you go, oh, well, that's a major 3rd. Oh, that's a minor 6th. And suddenly you can start speaking and listening and understanding the language of music on this level. What we're doing right now is we're learning the ah and the A are the two different sounds of the letter A that then is composed into words. We've all started off going, okay, what are these 26 letters? What are their different sounds? And we start reading at the very beginning and we go, module, module. But now we mostly can read, so we can just read down and say, oh, that's the word module. What we're doing right now is we're learning the basic building blocks of theory on the fretboard, on the keyboard, conceptually in our minds, and with our ears. So this concludes Module 3, and we're going to take a short break and get into Module 4. Please ask some questions on the community, and I'll see you there.